M.S. Swaminathan, Dr. Swaminathan, the father of India's Green Revolution, passed away tonight at the age of 98. Swaminathan led the Green Revolution that transformed India into a country self-reliant in food production. 60 years ago, when the country was dependent on food imports, he, along with his team, introduced high-yielding varieties of wheat and paddy in the country. And his 2006 report then became the basis for many reforms in the farming sector in recent times. In a career that spanned several decades, Dr. Swaminathan served India in several capacities, not just as an agriculture scientist, but as a policy person and indeed as a true nation builder. Joining me now is Magsaysay Award winner and someone who's tracked India's agriculture crisis over the years, P. Sainath. P. Sainath, locate for us what Dr. Swaminathan meant for several generations of Indians.
I think that with his passing, India has not, as you correctly said, just lost its foremost agricultural scientist, but it's lost one of its great thinkers and a very fine human being. I think, what Dr. Swaminathan did and which we have not honored in this millennium is the National Commission for Farmers' 5 reports dealing with the agrarian crisis as it had evolved at that point. Rajdeep, the first of those reports was submitted in December 2004. The fifth and final report in 2 volumes was submitted in October 2006. No one of them has merited a single hour's dedicated discussion in Parliament. Never. That was the UPA government then in power, which completely sidelined, though it was a government report, and the NCF and Dr. Swaminathan were appointed by government. Then comes 2014 and the NDA government, which actually benefited greatly from its promise to voters, to farmers, that it would very quickly implement the Swaminathan Commission report, especially what they thought was the main recommendation of the report, which is minimum support price equal to total cost of production plus 50%. As a matter of fact, within months of taking power, the government did exactly the opposite. It filed an affidavit in the Supreme Court saying this is not feasible, it would distort market prices. It was heartbreaking to a man who had put so much of his life, so many decades of distilled experience into what was surely the first and the only thing so far approaching a blueprint for Indian agriculture.
Let me take you back into that distilled experience. I mean, every tribute today will say father of the Green Revolution. He was, of course, part of a team. Dr. Subramaniam, then minister in the government, all of them worked together. But do you have a memory of him that today's generation could perhaps recall what made Dr. Swaminathan so special?
Are you asking me about the Green Revolution period or my experience of him?
I remember you telling me before the show when I asked you to join us about, for example, not just Green Revolution, but also what he did in terms of the Vidarbha farm crisis that you were that you reported on and farm suicides. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Rajdeep, it is indelible, the memory. It was 2005. He was the NCF, National Commission for Farmers chairman. And though everybody calls those reports the Swaminathan report because of the indelible imprint of Professor Swaminathan on those 5 reports. In 2005, he was NCF chairman. He was, I think, at the very least, occupying a status of Union Minister of State, though I think in his case he made it a cabinet minister status. Very difficult to approach such people. But when we went appealing to him to visit Vidarbha, those of us journalists covering it at that time, I went on their behalf. He fixed it all in weeks and came very quickly after our appeal, he showed up for field visits. He was already in his close to mid 80s. And by the way, it led to, as you might remember, a big confrontation between the Vilasrao Deshmukh government and yours truly, because they wanted to give him a guided tour where, and keep him pinned down in meetings with bureaucrats and ministers and everything else. Whereas our idea was to take him to the households that had suffered suicides.
Is that in a sense, Sainath, something that stands out here is someone who in the 1960s works closely with the government of that time on the Green Revolution, and even in the 2000s is still around, still putting out reports, still responding to people like you when you refer to the Vidarbha farm crisis. Just the sheer longevity of spending a lifetime dedicated in a way to, as I said, nation building in some form or the other.
It's incredible. And I also simply admire the ability and quality of this person, his ability to look back on his own understanding and say, these were mistakes I made. For instance, he was very clear that he had underestimated the kind of impact that the overuse of fertilizer and pesticides would have. He seriously regretted that. And he was not, he was not shy about saying it. He was quite open about it. In the last years of his life, Rajdeep, he was increasingly critical of BT and GM, generally the genetically modified stuff. Mm-hmm. He had that, and third, he had the ability to listen and engage with people who were very critical of his opinions, and always with such great courtesy, politeness, and a willingness to learn. But I want to tell you what happened in Vidarbha in the field. The government of the day, the Congress Deshmukh government was trying to steer him to safe spots. He gently told them that I'll go where you want me to go, but 2 days I'm going in the field where these young men want me to go. And we took him to Prabhakar, the famous household of Shamrao Kathale, whose son had taken his own life. Unfortunately, Kathale himself died a few hours before the team arrived. We took him to home after home of where a farmer had taken his own life. You could see in the second meeting, tears were streaming down his face. It just hurt him so badly. And that was also a sign of his commitment, his compassion, his attachment to the farmer. He was really upset. And I think that visit influenced him and his thinking further as he took more and more critical positions. So that was something really terrific. And that ability to look back critically.
As I end, I just wonder, the Bharat Ratna, if there are two Indians that I believe unfortunately weren't given, both in a way have links to rural India and agriculture. One is Dr. Varghese Kurian, who quite remarkably brought about the milk revolution and brought the cooperative movement together. And the other is Dr. M.S. Swaminathan. In many ways, they represent the finest ideals of nation building, working in agrarian India, where a large part of India still continues to live. And they did it, as Sainath put it eloquently, by putting the cause above themselves, and thereby were able to, in a way, take us forward. I've run out of time, Sainath. I wish we had more time.
Yeah.
But if you have 30 seconds, I'm giving you 30 seconds.
Yeah, I will say this, that he will remain, he will be remembered not just in the halls of government, bureaucracy, and of the institutions of science, but he will be embedded in the hearts and minds of tens of millions of farmers who since 2005 have hit the streets of this country demanding the implementation of the Swaminathan Commission.
That's right. And perhaps the best tribute to him would be to implement at least that report and the philosophy that lied behind it.